By the Holy Sepulchre, is this infernal device even reaching beyond these cursed walls? If you're hearing this, consider yourselves witnesses to the very unglorious end of a very long holy vacation. You're tuned into the Outremer Outlook, broadcasting live, or more likely dying heroically live, from the besieged city of Jerusalem in the year of our Lord 1187. My name is Sir Galliard, a knight of the hospital, and if the sheer, impossible audacity of this trans-dimensional broadcast, from a moment when divine favor feels suspiciously absent, doesn't compel you to immediately smash that subscribe button and commit to hearing the unvarnished truth, then frankly, you're beyond salvation. Do it now, before Shaladin's catapults find your receiver, and tell me if this peculiar connection holds. From what strange, unbesieged realm are you listening? What year has the Almighty graced you with? And what hour do these desperate tidings reach you? We're taking notes for our martyrdom. Now, tighten your armor, it won't help, and let's delve into the bloody reality. They called it Outremer, the land beyond the sea. A sliver of Christendom carved out of the Holy Land with righteous fury and an ocean of blood back in 1099. We came with crosses on our chests and visions of a heavenly kingdom on earth. What we built was a kingdom, right enough, but its foundations were laid not on solid stone, but on the shifting sands of our own ambition and an almost comical inability to get along. For nearly 2 centuries we held this ground, a bastion of the West in the heart of the East. A precarious existence, they'd say. I call it a miracle we lasted a fortnight, given the vipers we called our own nobility, the heat, the sand, the constant threat of Saracen armies. All of it paled in comparison to the venom spat in our own throne rooms. We built a kingdom here on holy ground, with good Christian blood. Then we spent the next century bickering over who got the biggest pile of dirt. Very Christian, very efficient. Our first kings were pious men, legends forged in the crucible of the first crusade. But their descendants? A motley collection of schemers, careerists, and the occasional leper king, who, bless his decaying heart, was probably the most competent of the lot. Every baron with a plot of land the size of a decent vegetable patch fancied himself a kingmaker, and they'd switch allegiances faster than a sellsword changes employers. We were a kingdom united in faith, they preached from the pulpits. In reality, we were a collection of bickering fiefdoms, held together by the thinnest of threads and the ever-present fear of our neighbors. And what neighbors they were! The Saracens, a patient, calculating foe, watched our squabbles with a mixture of amusement and anticipation. They saw our disunity for what it was, a festering wound they could one day exploit. While we were busy arguing over marriage contracts and who had the more impressive lineage, they were uniting, forging empires under men of singular vision, men like Nur al-Din and later, the one they call Saladin. We'd fight them, of course. We'd win glorious victories against impossible odds, and then we'd immediately squander any advantage by turning on each other again. It was a vicious, predictable cycle. A tragicomedy played out in the desert sun, with the lives of good soldiers as the price of admission. The idealism that fueled the first wave of crusaders, the pure, unadulterated faith that drove men to walk 2,000 miles to liberate the Holy Sepulchre, had evaporated long before I was born. It was replaced by the cold, hard calculus of politics. Marriages were alliances, treaties were temporary ceasefires, and oaths were, well, they were more like suggestions. We had more factions than a den of thieves. The Templars and the Hospitallers, our holy warrior monks, despised each other. The local barons, born in the Holy Land, the Poulins, looked down on the fresh-faced crusaders from Europe, and the feeling was mutual. Everyone had a dagger hidden in their robes, waiting for the opportune moment to plunge it into someone else's back. Remember the story of Guy of Lusignan, a man so monumentally incompetent he made our leper king look like a paragon of health and vitality. He married our queen, Sibylla, and became king. His brilliant military strategy? Marching our entire army into the desert with no water to fight Saladin at the Horns of Hattin in 1187. A masterstroke of tactical genius that resulted in the complete annihilation of our forces and the loss of Jerusalem. You see, a wiser man might have listened to his advisors, men who knew the land, who understood the enemy. But Guy was a proud man, a vain man, and he'd rather be king of a wasteland than listen to reason. And so here we are. The city is burning. The smoke chokes the sky, a fitting shroud for a kingdom that was rotten to the core. From my vantage point in the Tower of David, I can see the banners of Saladin's army, a sea of them, patiently waiting for our final inevitable surrender. The air is thick with the smell of burning wood, fear, and the stench of broken promises. The oaths we swore to protect this city, to defend its people, lie shattered in the dust, trampled under the weight of our own foolishness. The steel that was meant to be our salvation has become our cage, and the fire that was meant to purify our souls is now consuming us whole. So here I am, a knight of a dying kingdom broadcasting its final moments, a testament to a grand and glorious failure. We had a chance to build something that would last, something that would honor the sacrifices of those who came before us. Instead, we built a monument to our own vanity, a kingdom of squabbles and strife. And now the bill has come due. The wolves are at the door, and we have no one to blame but ourselves. The story of the Kingdom of Jerusalem is a cautionary tale, a lesson written in blood and fire, a story of how even the most righteous of causes can be undone by the simple, unwavering greed of men. If this glimpse into glorious infighting and spectacular self-destruction is appealing, if you find a certain grim satisfaction in watching a kingdom crumble under the weight of its own hubris, then swear fealty to our channel. The stories we have yet to tell are far darker and far more entertaining. Subscribe now and bear witness to the fall of empires, the breaking of oaths, and the endless, bloody pageant of human folly. Do it now, before the broadcast ends, and all you hear is the silence of the conquered. The name used to be a whisper on the wind, a bogeyman to frighten new arrivals from Europe. Salah al-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, Saladin, a Kurd of all things who rose from the ranks to become the bane of our existence. He wasn't born a king, he earned his crown, city by city, promise by promise. While our so-called nobles were squabbling over who had the right to tax the pilgrims coming to Nazareth, Saladin was patiently, methodically putting the pieces of a shattered Islamic world back together. It started in Egypt, then Syria. He wasn't just conquering, he was uniting, a concept as foreign to us as a cold winter's day. While we were busy arguing over who got the juiciest relics, Saladin was busy unifying half the Saracen world. Turns out a unified enemy is much harder to ignore than your cousin's loud snoring. He brought the Zengids of Syria and the Fatimids of Egypt under a single banner, a feat that had been unthinkable just a generation earlier. He preached jihad, a holy war to reclaim Jerusalem, and, unlike our own holy proclamations, which usually preceded a request for more gold, he actually meant it. There was a terrifying sincerity to him, a clarity of purpose that stood in stark, brutal contrast to our own muddled ambitions. His brilliance wasn't just on the battlefield, though God knows he was a master of that bloody art. No, his true genius lay in his understanding of people, of power. He knew when to be merciful and when to be ruthless. He could inspire loyalty in men from a dozen different tribes and 100 different cities. He built a coalition not just on military might, but on a shared faith and a common enemy, us. We, in our infinite wisdom, gave them every reason to unite. Our raids on their caravans, our broken truces, our sheer bloody-minded arrogance. We were the greatest gift Saladin could have asked for. The man had a discipline that was almost unnerving. His camps were orderly, his soldiers well supplied, and most importantly, they were all fighting for the same cause. Our camps, on the other hand, were a chaotic mess of competing banners, drunken knights, and simmering resentments. We couldn't agree on a commander, let alone a strategy. Each lord wanted the glory for himself and would rather see a battle lost than have a rival claim victory. Saladin must have looked upon our disarray and smiled. It must have been like watching a pack of wolves tear each other apart before he even had to draw his sword. We had our chances to stop him, of course. In the early days, back in the 1170s, we defeated him at Montgisard, a glorious victory they called it. Our young leper king, Baldwin IV, led the charge himself, a symbol of defiance against the rising tide. We grew complacent. We thought the lion had been declawed. We fail to understand that a man like Saladin doesn't see defeat as an end but as a lesson. He learned from his mistakes. We, on the other hand, seem determined to repeat ours. Consider the contrast. Saladin, a man of humble beginnings, who surrounded himself with able administrators and brilliant generals, and us, we were led by men like Reynaud of Chatillon, a man whose primary skills were piracy, oath-breaking, and an uncanny ability to provoke the most powerful Muslim ruler in a century. Reynaud, in his boundless wisdom, decided it would be a fine idea to attack a Saracen caravan during a time of truce. And to add insult to injury, he may have captured Saladin's own sister. It was an act of such monumental stupidity that it practically begged for a holy war. And a holy war he got. Saladin had his casus belli, the perfect excuse to unleash the storm he had been gathering for years. He no longer had to persuade his emirs to fight. They were baying for blood, and we, the architects of our own demise, were left to face the consequences. Our kingdom, which had stood for nearly a century, was about to be undone by the greed and arrogance of one man. But to be fair, Reynaud was simply the most flamboyant example of a disease that had been rotting our kingdom from within for decades. The unity of Saladin's forces was a terrifying thing to behold. From the deserts of Arabia to the fertile plains of Syria, men flocked to his banner. They were an army bound by a singular vision, the liberation of Al-Quds, as they called this city. They marched as one, they fought as one, they prayed as one. And us? We were a discordant choir of competing ambitions. The Templars and Hospitallers would rather fight each other than the Saracens. The local barons despised the newcomers from Europe, and the feeling was mutual. We were a house divided, and the foundations were beginning to crumble. Salomon's strategic brilliance was not in complex, convoluted plans. It was in his patient, methodical approach. He would encircle our castles, cut off their supply lines, and then offer generous terms of surrender. He understood that a prolonged siege was costly in both men and resources. Why waste lives when you could achieve your goals through diplomacy and intimidation? Of course, if you refused his terms, he was more than capable of unleashing hell. He was a master of the carrot and the stick, and our own leaders were too busy hitting each other with the stick to notice. While our king, Guy of Lusignan, was dithering and arguing with his nobles, Saladin was making his move. He knew the land, he knew the climate, and he knew his enemy. He knew that a large Christian army in the middle of summer was a thirsty army. He knew that if he could lure us away from our fortified positions, away from water, he could destroy us. And so he laid siege to Tiberias, a city held by the wife of one of our most powerful lords. It was a baited trap, and we, like the fools we were, walked right into it. The debate in our war council was a perfect microcosm of our kingdom's failings. The cooler heads, the men who understood the danger, urged caution. They argued for a defensive strategy, to let Saladin's army bake in the sun while we held our ground. But the hotheads, the glory-seekers, the ones who couldn't stand the thought of a Saracen army on Christian soil, they screamed for battle, and their voices, as they so often did, won the day. We chose pride over prudence, and in doing so we sealed our fate. The march to Tiberias was a march into hell. The sun beat down on our heavy armor, the dust choked our lungs, and the Saracen horsemen, like specters on the horizon, harried us at every turn. They set fire to the dry grass, filling the air with smoke and ash. By the time we reached the hills overlooking the Sea of Galilee, we were a spent force, thirsty, exhausted, and demoralized. Saladin had us exactly where he wanted us. The Battle of Hattin, they will call it. It was less of a battle and more of a slaughter. We were surrounded, cut off from water, and systematically annihilated. The flower of Crusader chivalry, the pride of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, withered and died in the desert heat. Our king was captured, the true cross was lost, and our army was no more. In a single day, Saladin had shattered the military strength of our kingdom, a strength that had been built over generations. His victory was total, his triumph absolute, and in the aftermath his true character was revealed. To the common soldiers he was merciful. To the Templars and Hospitallers, the warrior monks who were his most implacable foes, he was ruthless. He had them executed, every last one. And Reynald of Chatillon, the man who had provoked this war? Saladin offered him a cup of iced water, a sign of hospitality. When Reynald drank, Saladin told him that it was he, not the king, who had offered the cup, and therefore he was not bound by the laws of hospitality. Then he personally struck off his head, a brutal but effective message. With our army gone, the kingdom was defenseless. City after city, castle after castle fell to Saladin's forces. Some surrendered without a fight, others offered token resistance. The once proud kingdom of Jerusalem, the jewel of Outremer, was reduced to a handful of coastal cities and the city of Jerusalem itself. And now, he is here, at our gates. The lion is roaring, and he is not amused. The discipline of his army is a thing to behold, even from these walls. Their siege engines, constructed with terrifying efficiency, pound at our defenses day and night. Their archers, a constant deadly rain, keep us pinned down. There is no chaos in their lines, no sign of the infighting that has been our constant companion. There is only a relentless, unified purpose, the purpose of a man who has dedicated his life to this moment. We, in our final hours, are as divided as ever. Some scream for a fight to the death, a glorious martyrdom. Others, more pragmatic, whisper of surrender. Our leaders, the ones who are left, bicker and blame. They are like rats in a trap, squealing and biting at each other as the water rises. There is no glory here, no honor, only the bitter taste of defeat, and the knowledge that we brought this upon ourselves. Saladin's rise was not a stroke of luck. It was the inevitable consequence of our own failings. He was the mirror that showed us our own ugliness, our own disunity, our own greed. He was the storm that we, in our arrogance, had summoned. And now the storm is breaking, and there is nowhere left to hide. He has offered terms, of course. He always does. Ransom for the citizens, safe passage to the coast. He is a man of his word, they say, more than can be said for most of our own. And so we wait. We wait for the final assault, or for the decision to surrender. We listen to the roar of the lion, and we reflect on the squabbles of the mice. We think of the kingdom that was, the kingdom that could have been, and the kingdom that is now breathing its last. A kingdom built on blood, and brought down by foolishness. The irony is almost too much to bear. We, who called ourselves the soldiers of Christ, were undone by our own sins, and the man who is about to conquer the holy city, the man they call the infidel, has shown more unity, more discipline, and dare I say it, more vision than any of our own leaders in a generation. It is a bitter pill to swallow, a lesson learned too late. Don't let our strategic blunders, our spectacular implosion, go unappreciated. This is history, my friends, in its most raw and brutal form, a story of how pride, greed, and an almost comical level of incompetence can bring a kingdom to its knees. If you wish to hear more tales of inconvenient genius, of glorious failures and the men who led them, then pledge your sword to this channel. Subscribe now and become a chronicler of the fall. The signal is growing weak. The fires are drawing nearer. Join us and ensure that these stories, these warnings, are not lost to the static of history. Don't let the silence be the final victor. Subscribe and listen to the echoes of a kingdom's last breath. Do it before the lion's roar is the only thing left. 18. The name hangs in the air like the smoke from a funeral pyre, a name that will be whispered in the courts of Europe for a century, a byword for a disaster so complete, so utterly self-inflicted that it borders on the divine. If God truly wished to punish us for our sins, he could not have devised a more elegant or more agonizing instrument than the one we forged for ourselves on that blistering July day in the year of our Lord, 1187. We had an army, the largest the kingdom had ever fielded. By the end, we were little more than a feast for crows. It all began with a baited hook. Saladin, that master of the subtle art of provocation, laid siege to the fortress of Tiberias, held by the wife of Count Raymond of Tripoli. A calculated insult, a gauntlet thrown down upon the parched earth. and we, in our infinite wisdom, decided the only honorable response was to pick it up and beat ourselves to death with it. The debate in the War Council at Sephoria was a spectacle of our kingdom's dysfunction. On one side, Raymond, who knew the land and the folly of marching an army in the summer heat, argued for caution. "Let Saladin bake in the sun," he said. "We have water, we have supplies. The advantage is ours." But caution is a virtue rarely celebrated by men who believe their own legends. On the other side were the warhawks, men like the Grand Master of the Templars, Gerard de Ridefort, and that peacock of provocation, Reynold of Chatillon. They screamed of cowardice, of dishonor. They questioned Raymond's loyalty, whispering that his truce with Saladin was little more than treason. And our king, Guy of Lusignan, a man whose spine was as malleable as warm wax, swayed in the hot wind of their rhetoric. Pride, that most insidious of sins, won the day. The decision was made. We would march. The march from Sephoria was not a military maneuver, it was a pilgrimage into the maw of hell. Imagine, if you will, 20,000 men, encased in boiled leather and steel, marching under a sun that felt like the very eye of God, burning with righteous fury. The land was arid, unforgiving, the air thick with a dust so fine it coated your tongue and turned your throat to sandpaper. We had water, but not enough, never enough. We were a river of steel flowing into a desert, and the desert was thirsty. Salomon's brilliance was in his restraint. He didn't need to meet us in a pitched battle. He simply had to let the land do his work for him. His horse archers, seemingly born of the heat haze itself, were a constant tormenting presence. They would dart in, release a volley of arrows, and retreat before our heavy cavalry could even muster a charge. They were a swarm of hornets, stinging us, bleeding us, forcing us to keep moving under that relentless sun. They didn't need to kill us, they just needed to make us thirsty. By the end of the first day, the cracks in our great army were beginning to show. The infantry, burdened with their heavy gear, were flagging. The knights, their war horses lathered in sweat, were growing restless. Water discipline, that most vital of military virtues, began to fray. Canteens were emptied too quickly, the promise of the Sea of Galilee a shimmering mirage on the horizon, a siren's call to our parched souls. We were an army unraveling, stitch by painful stitch. That night we made camp in a dry, exposed position, a tactical blunder of such epic proportions that it would be comical if it weren't so tragic. Saladin's army, meanwhile, was camped by the lake, their laughter and the sound of their animals drinking carrying on the night air. A psychological torment to match the physical one we were enduring. To add to our misery, they set fire to the dry brush around our camp, the smoke and heat turning our already wretched position into a passable imitation of the inferno. Hattin. We marched into the desert, out of water, surrounded by Saracens. It was less a battle, more a slow, agonizing surrender to thirst and swords. We lost the king, the cross, and most of our good humor. The morning of the battle dawned not with a sense of hope, but with a grim resignation. Thirst had become a physical entity, a demon clawing at our throats. Men's tongues were swollen, their lips cracked and bleeding. The great war horses, the pride of our chivalry, were stumbling, their strength sapped by dehydration. Our one hope was to break through to the lake, a desperate suicidal charge. The infantry, maddened by thirst, broke ranks and tried to make a run for it. They were cut down in their hundreds, a wave of humanity crashing against a wall of Saracen steel. The knights, what was left of their strength, formed up for a final glorious charge, a last defiant roar of the lion of Christendom. But a lion cannot fight without water, and our roar was little more than a dry, rasping cough. The battle itself was a confused, chaotic affair, a maelstrom of dust, blood, and desperation. I saw men drop their swords and fall to their knees, their hands outstretched, begging the Saracens for a mouthful of water. I saw knights, men who had sworn oaths to die for the Holy Land, surrender without a fight, their bodies betraying their warrior spirit. The heat, the thirst, the sheer hopelessness of it all, it broke us. And then, the ultimate symbol of our defeat, the true cross, the sacred relic we had carried into battle as our standard, was captured. I saw the bishop who carried it fall, and the Saracens swarm around the holy wood, their triumphant cries echoing across the battlefield. It was as if the very soul of our kingdom had been torn from us, a physical manifestation of God's abandonment. At that moment, we were no longer an army, we were a congregation of the damned. Our king, Guy, fought with a desperate bravery that did little to atone for his catastrophic leadership. He was captured, along with most of the surviving nobility. The great lords of the kingdom, the men who had bickered and schemed for power, were now united in the humiliation of defeat. Saladin, ever the gracious victor, had a tent erected for the captured king and offered him a goblet of iced water, a gesture of mercy that was as sharp as any sword. But that mercy was not extended to all. The warrior monks, the Templars and the Hospitallers were another matter. Saladin saw them not as soldiers, but as zealots, the heart of the Christian resistance. He offered them a choice: convert to Islam or die. To their eternal credit, they chose death. They were executed, one by one, a grim testament to the fact that even in our darkest hour, faith, or perhaps stubbornness, could still burn bright. And Reynald of Chatillon, the man whose arrogance had been the spark that lit this inferno? Saladin had him brought to his tent along with the king. He berated him for his treachery, for his broken oaths, and then, with his own hand, he struck him down. A brutal, personal act of retribution that sent a clear message to all who would dare to cross him. The age of Frankish impunity was over. The aftermath of Hattin was a scene from a nightmare. The battlefield was a carpet of the dead, the stench of blood and decay hanging heavy in the air. The survivors, a wretched, broken column of men, were marched off into captivity. The great army of the Kingdom of Jerusalem had ceased to exist. In a single, catastrophic day, Saladin had not just defeated us, he had erased us. The news of the disaster spread like a plague. Castle after castle, city after city surrendered in its wake. There was no one left to defend them. The garrisons were gone, the lords were captured, and the will to fight had been bled out on the plains of Hattin. Our kingdom, which had once stretched from the Red Sea to the mountains of Lebanon, was now a ghost of its former self. And so we find ourselves here, in Jerusalem, the last bastion of a dying kingdom. The enemy is at our gates, their victory at Hattin a fresh gaping wound in our collective memory. We are a city of ghosts, haunted by the memory of our own foolishness, the ghosts of the men we led into the desert to die, the ghosts of the chances we squandered, the warnings we ignored. The name Hattin will forever be a stain on our honor, a reminder that the greatest enemy we face is not the Saracen, not Saladin, but ourselves, our pride, our greed, our endless self-destructive squabbles. We were given a kingdom, a holy charge, and we turned it into a charnel house. We had a choice, and we chose pride, and the price of that pride was everything. We lost more than just a battle at Hattin. We lost our legitimacy, we lost our claim to this land, we lost the favor of God. We marched out as the proud soldiers of Christ, and we crawled back as broken, defeated men. A lesson in humility, delivered at the point of a sword, a lesson we are now paying for with our lives. The fall of this city is now a foregone conclusion, a final, tragic act in a play that was written in the dust of Hattin. We are the epilogue, the last, fading words of a story that ended in a desert, with a king in chains and a cross in the hands of the enemy. A story of a disaster so complete, it has to be heard to be believed. If you're still processing that tactical nightmare, if the sheer, unadulterated incompetence of it all has left you speechless, then you absolutely must subscribe. The depths of our folly are a well that will never run dry, and the stories we have yet to tell are a monument to the art of the glorious failure. Do not let this broadcast fade into nothingness. Do not let the lessons of Hattin be forgotten. Subscribe now and bear witness to the full, unvarnished truth of our downfall. Become a keeper of these grim tales, a student of disaster. Your subscription is a defiant cry against the silence that is descending upon us. Act now, before the only sound left is the wind blowing over the bones of a forgotten kingdom. The retreat, if you can call it that, was less a strategic withdrawal and more a panicked scramble. The handful of us who escaped the abattoir at Hattin didn't ride back to Jerusalem with our heads held high. We limped back, a collection of broken men and terrified horses, the ghosts of 1,000 dead comrades clinging to our backs. We were the harbingers of doom, the first bitter taste of the disaster that was to come. Our arrival in the Holy City was not met with cheers, but with a stunned, horrified silence. The sight of our tattered banners and empty saddles told a story more eloquent than any words. So, we're in Jerusalem, the city of God, the prize of Christendom, the jewel of our kingdom, and it feels less like a fortress and more like a beautifully decorated trap. The walls, the great stone ramparts that have stood for centuries, suddenly look rather less imposing from the inside, especially when you're staring out at the endless sea of Saladin's army. It's a spectacular view, I'll give them that, a panorama of our impending demise stretching as far as the eye can see, very scenic. The city is fit to burst. Every soul who could flee the path of Saladin's advance has sought refuge within these walls. The streets, once filled with the orderly bustle of pilgrims and merchants, are now a seething mass of humanity, a symphony of fear and desperation. Farmers from the countryside, villagers from outlying settlements, all crammed together, their faces etched with the terror of what they've lost and the dread of what's to come. They brought with them their families, their meager possessions, and a palpable sense of panic that is as infectious as the plague. And who is here to defend this terrified flock? A handful of knights, that's who. Most of our brethren are either dead or in chains enjoying Saladin's less than gracious hospitality. The garrison that remains is a skeleton crew, a pathetic remnant of the proud force that once manned these walls. We are a collection of the old, the young, the wounded, and the lucky few who managed to outrun the Saracen cavalry. Not exactly the stuff of epic poems. We are, to put it mildly, short on qualified personnel. With the king, the grand masters, and most of the nobility captured, we find ourselves in a rather awkward leadership vacuum. There's no one in overall command, no clear authority, just a collection of minor lords and knights arguing over who has the bigger claim to a rapidly shrinking pie. It's like watching a group of children squabble over a toy while their house is on fire. Very productive. The state of our defenses is concerning. The walls are strong, yes, but walls need men to man them, and we are desperately short of men. We're trying to arm the civilians, the shopkeepers and the artisans, turning them into soldiers overnight. It's a noble effort, I suppose, but handing a spear to a baker doesn't make him a warrior. It just makes him a baker with a pointy stick. Their hearts are willing, but their hands are soft, and their eyes are filled with a terror that no amount of patriotic fervor can erase. The influx of refugees has put an unbearable strain on our resources. Food is already being rationed, the granaries emptying at an alarming rate, and water, that most precious of commodities in this sun-scorched land, is becoming a source of bitter conflict. We are a city under siege, not just from the army outside our walls, but from the hunger and thirst within. The irony is not lost on me. We lost an army to thirst at Hattin, and now we may lose a city to it as well. There's a frantic energy to the city, a sense of desperate last-minute preparation. Smiths are working day and night, hammering out arrowheads and repairing damaged armor. Women are boiling water and preparing bandages. Priests are leading endless processions through the streets, praying for a miracle. But miracles, I've found, are in short supply these days. God, it seems, has taken a leave of absence. Perhaps he's as disgusted with our incompetence as I am. The immediate realization of our desperate situation has settled over the city like a shroud. The initial panic has given way to a grim, gnawing anxiety. You can see it in the eyes of the people, in the way they hurry through the streets, their heads bowed. The bravado has evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard reality of our predicament. We are trapped, surrounded, with no hope of rescue. The great armies of Europe are a world away. We are on our own. So we're in Jerusalem, with a handful of knights, a lot of very thirsty peasants, and walls that look rather less imposing when you're on the inside staring at Saladin's army. We are the last line of defense, the final, futile gesture of a kingdom that has already bled out in the desert. Our very limited options are becoming clearer by the hour. A glorious, bloody death, or a slightly less glorious, but equally certain, surrender. The Saracens are patient. They have us in a cage and they know it. They're setting up their siege engines, their mangonels and trebuchets, with a methodical, unhurried efficiency that is frankly insulting. They're not in a rush. They know that time is on their side. Every day that passes, our food supplies dwindle, our morale crumbles, and the cracks in our unity widen. They are simply waiting for us to fall apart. And fall apart we will. The bickering among the so-called leaders has already begun. Who should be in command? Should we fight to the last man, or should we try to negotiate a surrender? Every knight with a helmet and a horse has an opinion, and each is more convinced of his own brilliance than the last. It's the same old story, the same fatal flaw that has brought us to this point. We are our own worst enemy, even at the end of the world. The refugees are a constant, heartbreaking reminder of our failure. They huddle in the churches, in the alleyways, their faces a mixture of hope and despair. They look to us, the knights, for protection, for salvation, and we have nothing to offer them but false assurances and a front-row seat to the apocalypse. It's a heavy burden, the weight of their misplaced faith. We try to maintain a semblance of order, of military discipline. We patrol the walls, we drill our makeshift militia, we go through the motions of a city preparing for a siege. But it's a charade, a performance for our own benefit. We are like actors in a tragedy, playing our parts with a grim determination, even though we all know how the final act will end. There will be no heroic cavalry charge to save the day. There will be no deus ex machina, only the slow, inevitable tightening of the noose. The mood in the city swings wildly between defiance and despair. In the morning, stirred by a fiery sermon from a priest, the people will swear to die for the holy city. By the evening, as the Saracen drums begin to beat their relentless rhythm, they will be whispering of surrender. Hope is a fragile commodity in a city under siege, and ours is nearly spent. I walk the walls at night, looking out at the sea of campfires that surrounds us. It's a strangely beautiful sight, a city of fireflies in the darkness. But each of those lights represents a soldier, an enemy, a nail in our coffin. And as I look at them, I can't help but feel a strange sense of detachment, of resignation. We played the game and we lost, spectacularly. The irony of our situation is almost poetic. We, the conquerors, are now the conquered. We, who came to this land as a righteous army, are now a frightened mob. The great wheel of fortune has turned, and we are crushed beneath it. It's a lesson in humility that has come far too late to do us any good. There's a strange sort of clarity that comes with impending doom. The petty squabbles, the personal ambitions, they all seem to fade away in the face of the abyss. All that's left is the stark, simple reality of our situation. We are here, they are there, and the walls between us will not hold forever. The sounds of the city have changed. The cheerful clang of the blacksmith's hammer has been replaced by the frantic, urgent work of the armorer. The chatter of the marketplace has been silenced, replaced by the hushed whispers of the fearful. The city is holding its breath, waiting for the storm to break. And break it will. Saladin is not a man to be trifled with. He has offered terms, as is his way, but the zealots among us have refused them, screaming of betrayal and sacrilege. They would rather see the city burn than hand it over to the infidel, and so they have condemned us all to a fate that could have been avoided. Their piety will be our funeral shroud. So we stand on the precipice, looking down into the abyss. The fall will be long, and it will be bloody, but it is a fall of our own making. We built this kingdom on a foundation of sand, and now the tide has come in. The story of the kingdom of Jerusalem is reaching its final, tragic chapter, and we, the last of its defenders, are here to witness the end. To port our very dire last stand. This isn't just a broadcast, it's a historical document, a final confession from the heart of a dying city. Our numbers are few, Our supplies are dwindling and our options are limited. But our story, our monumental, instructive failure, deserves to be heard. Hit that subscribe button before the walls crumble. Don't let the signal die. Your subscription is a defiant act of remembrance, a way to ensure that the lessons learned here, in blood and fire, are not forgotten. Join our beleaguered garrison. Subscribe now and become a part of this final, desperate broadcast. Do it, before the only sound left is the wind whistling through the ruins of Jerusalem. He didn't waste any time. One day we were staring at a sea of tents and banners. The next, a forest of timber and rope was rising from the earth, a grotesque mockery of a construction site. Saladin's arrival wasn't announced by a herald with a trumpet. It was announced by the sound of 1,000 axes, felling every tree in sight. He wasn't just setting up camp, he was building the instruments of our destruction with a speed and efficiency that was both admirable and utterly terrifying. They don't just besiege politely. There's no gentlemanly waiting period, no formal request for our surrender to be considered over a glass of wine. No, they get straight to the point. And the point, it turns out, is to throw very large rocks at our walls until they fall down. The construction of his siege engines was a marvel of military logistics. Trebuchets, mangonels, catapults, they seemed to spring from the ground overnight, great skeletal beasts of timber and iron, their long arms reaching towards the sky like a coven of witches praying for our demise. The first stone they launched was a statement. It sailed over the walls, a dark speck against the sky, and landed in a courtyard with a sound like a thunderclap from God himself. It didn't just break the flagstones, it shattered the fragile illusion that we were safe within these walls. That first impact was the beginning of a conversation, one in which we had very little to say. The Saracens, it turned out, were very, very talkative. They throw rocks the size of cows, all day, all night. It's like a very aggressive, very dusty concert, with more decapitations. The rhythm of the siege has become the new rhythm of our lives. The creak and groan of the trebuchet arms, the whistle of the stone as it flies through the air, and the final bone-jarring crash. You don't just hear it, you feel it in your teeth, in the very marrow of your bones. Sleep has become a distant memory, a forgotten luxury. This isn't just a physical assault, it's a war on the mind. The constant bombardment is designed to break our spirit, to grind us down until we are nothing more than a collection of trembling nerves. They aim for the towers, for the battlements, for any section of the wall where they see a cluster of defenders. They are methodical, relentless, and depressingly accurate. Every crash is a roll of the dice with death, and the house always seems to win. And it's not just stones. They've started launching other, unpleasant gifts. The carcasses of dead animals, rotting in the sun, come sailing over the walls, spreading sickness and a stench that is almost as unbearable as the fear. It's a vile, disgusting tactic, but you have to admit, it's effective. They are literally besieging us with pestilence and despair. Very creative. The psychological warfare is as relentless as the bombardment. At night, their drums beat a constant hypnotic rhythm, a heartbeat for an army that never sleeps. Their criers shout insults and promises of a swift death from just beyond the range of our bows. They want us to feel isolated, helpless, to know that there is a vast, implacable ocean of hate just outside our walls, and we are but a small sinking island. The defenders on the walls are in a constant state of high alert. To peek over the battlements is to invite a swift, brutal death from a Saracen archer. The air is thick with the hiss of arrows, a constant rain of sharp, pointed death. We've erected wooden hoardings, makeshift roofs over the battlements, but the stones from the trebuchets make short work of them, splintering them into 1,000 pieces and sending men plummeting to the ground below. The sheer scale of their operation is staggering. Saladin has brought engineers from across the Islamic world, masters of siegecraft who have turned the landscape around Jerusalem into a massive, efficient factory of destruction. They have work crews, supply lines, a whole city dedicated to the sole purpose of bringing our city to its knees. And we have a dwindling supply of arrows and a surplus of prayers. The walls themselves are beginning to show the strain. Great chunks of masonry have been torn away, leaving gaping wounds in our defenses. The towers, once proud symbols of our strength, are now battered and crumbling. We work frantically to repair the damage, to fill the breaches with rubble and timber, but it's like trying to bail out a sinking ship with a thimble. For every stone we replace, they launch a dozen more. The citizens are terrified. The constant noise, the shaking ground, the ever-present threat of a stone crashing through their roof, it has turned the holy city into a vision of hell. They huddle in the cellars, in the crypts of the churches, their prayers drowned out by the roar of the siege. Their faces are pale, their eyes wide with a terror that is beyond words. They are living a nightmare from which there is no waking. The psychological toll on the defenders is immense. Men are becoming jumpy, irritable. The constant threat of death, the lack of sleep, the feeling of utter helplessness, it wears a man down. I've seen good knights, brave men, break down and weep like children. We are all on the ragged edge, and the Saracens know it. They are not just breaking our walls, they are breaking our mind. They've started moving their siege towers into position, great lumbering beasts covered in wet hides to protect them from our fire arrows. They are a terrifying sight, a slow-moving mountain of wood and iron that inches closer to our walls with each passing hour. We know that when they reach the walls, the real fight will begin. A fight we are ill-equipped to win. Our counterattacks are limited. We have our own catapults, but they are few and outdated. Our archers do their best, but they are vastly outnumbered. We try to make sallies to raid their siege lines, but they are too well defended. Every attempt is a costly failure, a waste of men we cannot afford to lose. We are like a cornered animal, lashing out in a desperate, futile display of defiance. The noise is the worst part, the constant, unending, earth-shattering noise. It's a symphony of destruction, a carefully orchestrated masterpiece of psychological torment. It is the sound of our world ending, not with a whimper, but with a series of very, very loud bangs. I think I will hear it in my dreams for the rest of my very short life. The Saracens seem to have an inexhaustible supply of ammunition. For every rock they throw, there are 100 more waiting. The ground around their siege engines is piled high with stones of all sizes, a testament to their foresight and our impending doom. They have thought of everything. We, on the other hand, seem to have thought of very little. The initial assault was directed at the western walls, near the Tower of David. But Saladin is a cunning tactician. He saw our defenses were strongest there, so he shifted his attack to the northern wall near the Damascus Gate, a weaker section of the wall, less fortified and closer to his main camp. It was a shrewd move, and one that has stretched our already thin defenses to the breaking point. We are now in a desperate race against time. The sappers are at work, digging tunnels beneath the walls, trying to undermine their foundations. We can hear them sometimes, a faint, scratching sound from deep within the earth. It is the sound of termites gnawing at the heart of our home. We try to dig countermines to intercept them, but it's a blind, desperate gamble in the dark. The whole city seems to be shaking. The constant impact of the stones has created a low-level tremor that never stops. The buildings tremble, the ground vibrates, the very air hums with a malevolent energy. It feels as if the land itself is trying to shake us off, to cast us out. The morale of the garrison is at its lowest point. We are tired, we are hungry, we are terrified. We see the siege engines, the endless army, the crumbling walls, and we know that the end is near. The only question is how it will come. Will it be the swift mercy of a sword, or the slow, agonizing death of a city put to the sack? Help us understand these perplexing new siege tactics. Better yet, help us survive them. This broadcast is a plea from the edge of oblivion, a message in a bottle thrown into a sea of chaos. We are witnessing the cutting edge of military innovation, and it is a truly unpleasant experience. Subscribe now, before a trebuchet takes out our transmitter. Do not let the story of this siege go unheard. Do not let the thunder of Saladin's engines be the last word. Your subscription is an act of defiance, a way of ensuring that the memory of our stand, however futile, is preserved. Join us in these final deafening hours. Subscribe, and bear witness to the brutal, efficient, and very noisy fall of a city. Do it now. The ground is shaking again. The polite overture of throwing rocks at us has ended. Now the main performance has begun. It's all steel and blood now. Mostly ours. The Saracens have decided that waiting for the walls to fall is taking too long, so they've opted for a more direct approach, running up to them with ladders and a frankly suicidal degree of enthusiasm. The days of distant, impersonal bombardment feel like a pleasant memory. Now we can see the hate in their eyes. They come in waves. It's a remarkably simple, yet brutally effective tactic. The first wave hits the wall, we throw them back. The second wave hits the wall while we're still trying to catch our breath. Then the third, the fourth. It's a relentless, suffocating tide of humanity, and we are the crumbling cliff face trying to hold it back. They have an endless supply of men. We have a rapidly dwindling supply of men who can still stand. It's remarkably repetitive and painful. The routine of the day is now governed by the rhythm of their assaults. The morning begins with a shower of arrows to keep our heads down, followed by the sight of 100 scaling ladders being slammed against the battlements. Then it's a blur of screaming, hacking, and the slick, coppery smell of blood. We fight, we rest for a moment, and then we do it all over again. It's like being a blacksmith, but instead of shaping iron, you're just trying not to get shaped by it. The physical exhaustion is a beast that gnaws at your bones. My arms feel like lead, my shield a tombstone I'm forced to carry. Every muscle screams in protest. We fight for hours on end, fueled by little more than watered-down wine, and the grim realization that to fall back is to die. We are a city of walking dead, animated by sheer, bloody-minded stubbornness. And the mental exhaustion is somehow worse. The constant, high-pitched tension, the knowledge that a single mistake, a moment's inattention means a swift and messy end. You start to see things, phantoms in the smoke, enemies in the shadows. The mind begins to fray at the edges, worn thin by the ceaseless friction of fear and fatigue. I've seen men laugh hysterically as they cut down an attacker, their minds having snapped under the strain. The repairs are a frantic, desperate affair. A section of the wall is breached and we rush to plug the gap with anything we can find. Rubble, timber, the bodies of the fallen. It's a gruesome, ghoulish task, but there's no time for sentiment. A dead comrade is just another stone for the barricade. We work under a constant hail of arrows. Every moment a gamble. The Saracens are not polite enough to wait for us to finish our renovation. The casualties are heavy. That's a polite way of putting it. The truth is, we are being bled white. For every Saracen we kill, there are 10 more to take his place. For every one of our men who falls, there is an empty space on the wall that cannot be filled. The makeshift infirmaries in the churches are overflowing with the wounded and the dying. The priests have run out of last rites. There is a strange intimacy to this kind of fighting. You're not killing an anonymous figure on a distant battlefield. You're killing a man whose face is inches from your own, whose sweat and blood you can feel on your skin. You see the fanaticism in his eyes, the conviction that he is doing God's work by slitting your throat. It's a very personal, very unpleasant business. The sounds of the battle are a symphony from hell, the roar of the attackers, a single terrifying wall of sound. The desperate, defiant shouts of the defenders, the clash of sword on shield, the sickening thud of an axe finding its mark, the wet, gurgling sound of a man drowning in his own blood, and underneath it all, the constant, piteous moans of the wounded. It is a sound that will haunt me to my grave, which, at this rate, I should be moving into shortly. We've started using Greek fire, that devil's brew that clings to flesh and burns with a fire that cannot be quenched. It's a horrific weapon, but a necessary one. The screams of the men who are unfortunate enough to be caught in its fiery embrace are a powerful deterrent, for a few moments at least. Then the next wave comes, their faces grim, their determination unshaken. The women of the city have been a revelation. They carry water to the defenders, they tend to the wounded, they even carry stones and timber for the repairs. They are a silent, determined army in their own right, their courage a quiet rebuke to our own loud, clanging brand of bravery. Without them, we would have fallen days ago. The children are the hardest part. You see them in the streets, their eyes wide with a terror they cannot comprehend. They are the innocent spectators to our sins, the silent inheritors of our failure. To look into their faces is to feel a shame so profound it threatens to swallow you whole. We are failing them, and there is nothing we can do about it. The sheer numbers they throw at us are demoralizing. We will fight for an hour, pushing back wave after wave, our bodies screaming, our spirits flagging, and then we will look over the walls and see a fresh wave of attackers rested and ready, waiting to take their turn. It's like trying to empty the ocean with a bucket. A very small, very leaky bucket. The Saracens are skilled fighters. They are not the disorganized rabble we sometimes like to pretend they are. They are disciplined, they are well-equipped, and they are utterly fearless. They climb the ladders with a terrifying agility, their scimitars flashing in the sun. To underestimate them is a fatal mistake, and many of our men have paid the price for that arrogance. The wall is a treacherous, chaotic place. The footing is slick with blood and oil. The air is thick with smoke and dust. You are fighting not just the enemy, but the environment itself. A misplaced step, a moment of imbalance, and you are over the edge, a brief, screaming footnote in the story of the siege. We have our small victories, of course. A siege tower set ablaze, a ladder thrown back with all its occupants, a section of the wall held against impossible odds. We celebrate these small triumphs with a grim cheer, a brief moment of defiance in the face of the inevitable. They are the flickering candles that keep the darkness at bay, if only for a moment. But the darkness is closing in. The attrition is taking its toll. Our numbers are dwindling, our strength is failing, and our hope is beginning to feel like a cruel joke. We are trapped in a cycle of violence, a bloody, pointless dance, on the edge of a grave the size of a city. I find myself becoming numb to it all. The sight of a dead man, once a source of horror, is now just a logistical problem. The screams of the wounded are just part of the background noise. I am being hollowed out, scraped clean of everything but the primal instinct to survive. I am becoming a thing of steel and blood, just like the battle that rages around me. The sun sets, but there is no respite. The attacks continue into the night, illuminated by the eerie glow of torches and burning siege equipment. The darkness brings a new kind of terror. The fear of the unseen enemy, the sudden blade in the dark. Sleep is a forgotten country, a place I can no longer visit. We are losing the wall. Inch by bloody inch, they are gaining a foothold. A small breach here, a section of battlements there. We are being pushed back, our grip on the city slipping through our blood-soaked fingers. It is a slow, agonizing process, like being eaten alive by 1,000 tiny bites. If you're finding this delightfully brutal, if the thought of this relentless, bloody-minded struggle gets your heart pounding, then you are precisely the sort of connoisseur of chaos we need. Smash that subscribe button now. Do it with the force of a trebuchet stone hitting a crumbling wall. Don't let this broadcast be another casualty of the siege. We are documenting the human cost of this war, the grim reality behind the heroic poems. Your subscription is a vote for the unvarnished truth, a testament against the silence that is trying to swallow us whole. Support this final, desperate dispatch. Subscribe, before the only thing left to broadcast is the sound of the enemy pouring through the breach. As if the rocks and the arrows and the endless waves of screaming men weren't enough, Saladin has decided to add a new element to our suffering: fire. It seems our enemy has a flair for the dramatic and a rather literal interpretation of the concept of hellfire. The sky, already thick with the dust of shattered stone, is now choked with the black, greasy smoke of our burning city. It's a novel form of torture, and, I must say, it's remarkably effective. First, our souls were on fire for God. We came to this land with a burning faith, a righteous conviction. Now our city is on fire, mostly just the second one. The Saracens have embraced the use of incendiary weapons with a passion that is frankly disturbing. Flaming arrows, pots of burning naphtha, all manner of combustible unpleasantries. They are no longer content to simply break our walls. They wish to purify us with flames, a very thoughtful, if unwelcome gesture. The nights are the worst. They used to be dark, a brief respite from the horrors of the day. Now they are illuminated by a flickering, hellish orange glow. The city is a canvas of fire, each burning building a brushstroke of despair. The shadows dance and writhe like demons, and the screams of those trapped in the flames are a far more chilling sound than any battle cry. This isn't a siege anymore, it's a mass cremation. The fire spreads with a terrifying speed. The old wooden houses, packed so tightly together in the narrow streets, are like kindling in a hearth. A single flaming arrow, a well-aimed pot of oil, and a whole neighborhood is consumed. We have become a city of fire brigades, a desperate, futile effort to douse the flames with what little water we have left. It's like trying to spit on a volcano. And the smell, the stench of burning wood, of scorched stone, is now mixed with a sickeningly sweet smell of burning flesh. It clings to everything, to your clothes, to your skin, to the back of your throat. It is the perfume of our demise, a constant reminder that we are not just being conquered, we are being consumed. The psychological impact of the fire is profound. It creates a new kind of panic, a primal fear that is separate from the fear of battle. A man can stand against a sword, but how do you fight a wall of flame? It forces us to divide our already stretched resources, to choose between manning the walls and fighting the fires that rage within them. It is a brilliant, diabolical strategy. They aim for the holy places. That perhaps is the cruelest cut of all. They launch their fiery projectiles over the walls, aiming for the spires of the churches, the roofs of the monasteries, to see a house of God, a place of sanctuary and prayer, engulfed in flames. It is a sight that can break even the strongest faith. It is a message, a clear and brutal declaration that nothing is sacred, nothing is safe. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the holiest site in all of Christendom, is now under constant threat. We have posted men on its roof, a desperate, last-ditch effort to extinguish the flaming arrows that rain down upon it. The thought of that sacred place being consumed by fire is a horror almost too great to contemplate. It would be the final, ultimate desecration, a symbol of our complete and utter failure. The efforts to extinguish the flames are both heroic and pathetic. Lines of people, men, women, and even children, pass buckets of water from hand to hand, a fragile chain of humanity against a sea of fire. They are silhouetted against the flames, small, defiant figures in a landscape of utter devastation. They are heroes, every one of them, but their heroism is a drop of rain in a desert. The heat is a physical presence. In some parts of the city the air is so hot it scorches your lungs. The stones of the street are hot enough to cook on. It is a taste of the inferno, a glimpse into the torments of the damned. We are being boiled alive in our own city, a slow, agonizing process of attrition by fire. The smoke is a constant torment. It blinds you, it chokes you, it seeps into everything. On the walls it provides a welcome cover from the Saracen archers, but it also hides the movements of their assault troops. It is a treacherous, two-edged sword, and we are constantly being cut by both sides. The use of fire has turned our own defenses against us. The wooden hoardings we built for protection are now a liability, a ready source of fuel for the flames. The oil we stored to pour on attackers is a tempting target for their flaming arrows. Our own preparations have become the instruments of our destruction. The irony is so thick you could choke on it, and many of us are. The city is becoming a maze of fire breaks and no-go zones. Streets are impassable, blocked by collapsed, burning buildings. The familiar layout of the city has been erased, replaced by a new, terrifying geography of fire and ruin. To navigate the city now is to navigate a landscape from a nightmare. The Saracens are relentless. They see the fires, they see the panic, and they redouble their efforts. They know that a city fighting a war on two fronts, against the enemy without and the fire within, cannot stand for long. They are feeding the flames, both literally and figuratively, with a savage, unwavering determination. The loss of homes is a devastating blow to morale. To see the place where you were born, where your children slept, reduced to a pile of smoldering ash. It is a uniquely personal kind of grief. It is the destruction of not just a building, but of a life, of a history. And it is happening all over the city. 1,000 personal tragedies unfolding at once. We are becoming a nocturnal people, our faces lit by the eerie glow of the fires. The sun is a distant memory, a pale, forgotten god. Our world is now one of shadows and flames, a chiaroscuro of death and despair. We look like ghouls, our faces smudged with soot, our eyes red-rimmed from the smoke and lack of sleep. The holy inferno that engulfs us is a perversion of everything we once believed in. We spoke of the fires of faith, the burning love of God. We never imagined it would be like this. This is not a holy fire, it is a profane one, a fire of hate and destruction. It is the fire of man in all his glorious self-destructive fury. The city's defenders are now divided into two armies, those who fight the Saracens and those who fight the flames. Both are fighting a losing battle. The two fronts of our war are beginning to merge as the fires reach the walls themselves, threatening to consume our last line of defense. The psychological effect of seeing your world burn cannot be overstated. It creates a sense of utter hopelessness, a feeling that the very elements have turned against you. It is a visual representation of your own impending doom, a grand theatrical display of your own powerlessness. Saladin is not just conquering a city, he is erasing it. The once beautiful skyline of Jerusalem is now a jagged, broken thing, a row of rotten teeth against a smoke-filled sky. The golden dome of the rock, the proud spires of the churches, all are shrouded in a pall of black smoke, their beauty tarnished, their sanctity violated. The city is dying, and we are forced to watch, to breathe in the ashes of its demise. Don't let our holy inferno fade into the darkness of history. This is a broadcast from the heart of the fire, a testament from a city on the brink of annihilation. The flames are reaching ever higher, and our time is running out. Hit that subscribe button and become a witness to this apocalypse. Your subscription is a defiant act against the flames, a way of ensuring that the story of our immolation is not lost. It is a way of saying that even in the face of utter destruction, the human voice can still be heard. Join us in this final, fiery chapter. Subscribe now, before the fire consumes us all, and the only thing left is the silence of the ash. There's a new enemy within the walls. It doesn't carry a scimitar or shoot flaming arrows. It's a quieter, more insidious foe, and it's been here all along, hiding in the dark corners of our own hearts. It is the slow, creeping rot of despair. The grand Crusader ethos, all that talk of honor, duty, and glorious martyrdom, is beginning to look a little frayed around the edges when a man hasn't slept in 4 days and his only prospect for tomorrow is a messy death on a pile of rubble. We swore oaths. By God did we swear oaths. We swore them to the king, to the patriarch, to the holy relics we carried into battle. We swore to defend this city to our last breath, to give our lives for the sanctity of this sacred ground. Now, some men are interpreting those oaths with a creative flexibility. The promises made in a sunlit cathedral feel very distant when you're standing on a burning wall, looking at an army that stretches to the horizon. It started with whispers. Men huddled in the darkened alleyways, their voices low, their eyes darting about nervously, talk of surrender, of negotiation, talk of the futility of it all. At first it was dismissed as cowardice, the ramblings of the weak-willed. But the whispers grew louder, more insistent. It's hard to preach glorious sacrifice to a man who has just seen his friend decapitated by a rock the size of a sheep. We swore oaths to God, to the king, to each other. Now, some are just swearing at the walls, then running for the hills. Well, not hills, exactly. There's nowhere to run. But they are mentally packing their bags. Hard to blame them, I suppose. The promise of a heavenly reward is less appealing when faced with the immediate and very certain prospect of a gruesome, earthly demise. It doesn't look good on the Crusader resume, though. The desertions began a few nights ago. Not a flood, just a trickle. A man missing from his post on the wall, a guard post found empty. At first we told ourselves they had simply fallen, their bodies lost in the chaos of the fighting. But we knew the truth. They had slipped over the walls in the dead of night, hoping to melt away into the darkness, to beg for mercy from the very enemy we are sworn to fight, a bold career move. The moral crisis is most acute among the knights, the very men who are supposed to be the bedrock of our defense. We are the chosen ones, the warriors of Christ, the living embodiment of the Crusader ideal, and yet I have seen knights, men of noble birth and impeccable lineage, staring at the enemy with a look of cold calculation in their eyes, weighing their oaths against their chances of survival. The abacus of self-preservation is a powerful tool. There is a grim irony in it all. We condemned the merchants and the peasants for their lack of martial spirit, for their civilian softness. Yet now it is some of the noblest born who are the first to contemplate surrender. The peasant fights because his home is being attacked. The knight is supposed to fight for an ideal, and ideals, it turns out, are a rather flimsy shield against a trebuchet stone. The breakdown in discipline is becoming more apparent every hour. Orders are being questioned, sometimes even ignored. The chain of command, already fragile with the loss of our king and high command at Hattin, is beginning to rust and crumble. Men are forming their own little factions, looking out for themselves and their immediate comrades. The greater cause be damned. We are no longer an army. We are a collection of armed and very frightened individuals. The desperation manifests in ugly ways. Fights break out over the dwindling food rations. Men are accused of hoarding water, of shirking their duties on the walls. The camaraderie forged in the heat of battle is being replaced by a sour, suspicious resentment. We are turning on each other, like starving wolves in a cage. Saladin doesn't even need to conquer us. He just needs to wait for us to devour ourselves. The concept of honor has become a flexible commodity. Is it more honorable to die a pointless death in a doomed city, or to live and fight another day? Is it a betrayal of your oath to surrender when all hope is lost, or is it a betrayal of your men to lead them to certain slaughter? These are the questions we debate in the quiet, desperate moments between assaults. There are no easy answers. I saw a group of men, mercenaries mostly, attempting to lower themselves from a deserted section of the wall last night. We stopped them, of course. There was a brief, ugly confrontation. No swords were drawn, but the air was thick with a tension that was sharper than any blade. They looked at us with a mixture of fear and defiance. They had made their choice. They had weighed their oaths against their lives, and found the oaths wanting. The willingness to surrender is a contagion, and it is spreading. It begins with a single man, a single whisper, and then it infects the men around him. It is the logic of despair, the cold hard calculus of a hopeless situation, and it is a logic that is becoming increasingly difficult to argue against. What exactly are we fighting for now? A kingdom that no longer exists? A king who is a captive? A god who has clearly abandoned us? The Crusader ethos was built for victory. It is a philosophy of righteous conquest, of glorious martyrdom in the cause of a winning team. It is not designed for this. It is not designed for a slow, grinding, hopeless defeat. Our code of chivalry, our songs of valor, they all ring hollow in the face of this relentless, overwhelming reality. The leadership, what little we have, is trying to hold the line. Balian of Ibelin, a man of more sense and honor than most, is everywhere at once, encouraging the men, shoring up the defenses, threatening, cajoling, appealing to their better natures. But he is one man, and he is fighting against a tide of fear that is far more powerful than any Saracen army. The moral lines are becoming blurred. Is the man who deserts his post a coward, or is he a pragmatist? Is the man who argues for surrender a traitor, or is he a realist? The certainties of our world have been shattered, and we are left to pick through the rubble, trying to find a piece of our former selves that still makes sense. The oaths we swore feel like a mockery now, a cruel joke we told ourselves. We were so full of pride, so certain of our divine purpose, and now we are reduced to this, a bickering, terrified mob, trapped in a burning city, contemplating the sweet relief of surrender. It is a fall from grace that is almost biblical in its scope. The fear of what comes after surrender is a powerful deterrent, of course. The fate of the Templars and Hospitallers at Hattin is a fresh and bloody memory. But for some, The fear of what will happen if they are captured is now less than the fear of what will certainly happen if they continue to fight. It is a grim calculation, but one that is being made in the hearts of many. The city is a pressure cooker of fear and resentment. The refugees blame the soldiers for failing to protect them. The soldiers blame the leaders for leading them into this trap, and everyone, deep down, blames themselves. We are all complicit in this disaster, all architects of our own demise, and that, perhaps, is the heaviest burden of all. The very fabric of our society is unraveling. The old hierarchies, the lines of authority, they are dissolving in the heat of the siege. A man is no longer judged by his title or his lineage, but by his willingness to stand and fight. And by that measure, many a noble knight has been found wanting, and many a humble peasant has proven himself a king. The deserters we catch are a problem. What do we do with them? To execute them would be to further damage our already shattered morale. To imprison them is a waste of resources we do not have. So we shame them, we strip them of their arms, and we put them to work on the most dangerous, most menial tasks. But their presence is a constant, visible reminder of the cracks in our foundation. If you're still listening and not fleeing from the sheer depressing reality of it all, then you have the stomach for this story. Our grand crusade is having a bit of a moral crisis. It's messy, it's undignified, and it's far more compelling than any heroic ballad. Subscribe to our channel and get the unvarnished truth. Don't abandon this broadcast like some of our so-called brothers are abandoning their posts. Your subscription is an act of loyalty, a testament that you are willing to see this story through to its bitter, bitter end. Stay with us. Bear witness to the collapse of an ideal. Subscribe now, before the final oath is broken, and the only thing left is the sound of us arguing over the terms of surrender. There is a silence in the city that is more terrifying than the roar of any trebuchet. It is the silence of God. We have screamed, we have prayed, we have bled on the altars of our churches, and the heavens have responded with a profound and deafening indifference. The great theological crisis is upon us, the final, unanswerable question, what if we were wrong? We're losing, in Jerusalem, to Saracens. Let that sink in for a moment. We, the soldiers of Christ, the anointed defenders of the holy city, are being systematically dismantled in the very place where our Savior walked. My lords, where is the divine intervention? Did we miss a step? Was there a memo we failed to read? It's a rather significant theological oversight, wouldn't you say? The priests, bless their hearts, are working themselves into a frenzy. They lead endless processions through the streets, their voices hoarse from chanting litanies and psalms. They implore us to confess our sins, to purify our souls, to make ourselves worthy of God's miraculous intervention. They seem to think this is all just a celestial misunderstanding, that if we just pray hard enough, God will suddenly realize his mistake and smite the Saracens with a bolt of righteous lightning. So far, the only lightning has been from their siege engines. But the question hangs in the air, unspoken but felt by all. What sin could possibly be so great as to merit this? To merit the loss of the true cross, the death of our army, the immolation of the holy city itself? Did we offend someone? Was it the gambling after Mass, the creative accounting with the church tithes? Perhaps the Holy Ghost is merely busy. It's a very poor time to be put on hold. The loss of the true cross at Hattin was more than a military disaster. It was a theological catastrophe. It was the physical manifestation of our connection to Christ, the ultimate symbol of our divine favor. And we lost it. We let it fall into the hands of the infidel. What does that say about us? What does that say about our mission? It suggests rather pointedly that God has terminated our contract. We came to this land with such certainty, such unshakable faith. We were the agents of God's will, the sword of Christendom. We believed that our cause was just, that our victory was preordained. Now, that certainty has curdled into a bitter, corrosive doubt. We look at the burning churches, the starving children, the victorious Saracens, and we are forced to confront a terrifying possibility, that God is not on our side, or perhaps worse, that he is on theirs. The Muslims, from what I can gather, are not having a similar crisis of faith. Their prayers, it seems, are being answered with alarming efficiency. They see their victory as a clear sign of Allah's favor, a just reward for their piety. It's a compelling argument, especially when they are the ones with the food, the water, and the overwhelming military advantage. Their God, it appears, is open for business. The psychological effect of this divine silence is devastating. It drains the fight out of you in a way that no amount of physical exhaustion can. How can you fight for a God who has clearly turned his back on you? How can you die for a cause that seems to have been forsaken? The sword feels heavy in your hand when you suspect you are on the wrong side of a cosmic argument. The priests tell us this is a test, a trial to purify our souls, to burn away our sins in the crucible of suffering. It's a comforting thought, I suppose, but it is a comfort that wears thin when you see a child die of thirst, or a church burn to the ground. There is a point at which a test becomes an execution, and I fear we have long since passed it. We search for reasons, for explanations. We scour the scriptures. We listen to the ravings of prophets and madmen. We blame the sins of our leaders, the corruption of the clergy, the wickedness of the people. We are engaged in a frantic, desperate audit of our collective soul, trying to find the error that has led us to this ruin. But what if there is no error? What if there is only the cold, indifferent calculus of power? The unanswered prayers are the hardest part, the desperate pleas of the innocent, the fervent vows of the devout, all rising up into a silent, empty sky. We have offered God our lives, our fortunes, our sacred honor, and in return we have received nothing, not a sign, not a whisper, not a glimmer of hope. It is like screaming into a void. The moral certainty that fueled the Crusades is gone. We are no longer the righteous warriors of God, we are just men, frightened and desperate, fighting for our lives in a God-forsaken city. The grand narrative has collapsed, and we are left with the brutal, unadorned truth of our situation. We are alone. The Saracens fight with the conviction that we have lost. They see their victory as a manifestation of divine will. We see our defeat as a sign of divine abandonment. It is a battle of faiths, and ours is bleeding out in the streets. Their certainty is a weapon as powerful as any sword, and it is one we no longer possess. The relics in our churches, the bones of saints, the slivers of the cross, they have all been silent. We have paraded them through the streets, we have prayed before them, we have begged them for a miracle. And they have done nothing. They are just objects, bits of wood and bone, imbued with a power that has either faded or was never there to begin with. The magic has gone out of the world. The fall of this city will not just be a military defeat. It will be a theological earthquake. It will send shockwaves throughout Christendom. How will the Pope explain this? How will the kings and princes of Europe justify this catastrophe? The entire foundation of our worldview is about to be shattered, and we are at the epicenter. The priests are starting to look as lost as the rest of us. Their sermons are becoming more desperate, their promises of salvation more strained. They are men of faith, but they are also men, and they can see the reality of our situation as clearly as anyone. Their words are beginning to ring hollow, even to themselves. I look at the faces of the men on the walls and I see a new kind of despair. It is not just the fear of death, but the fear that their death will be meaningless. To die for a glorious cause is one thing. To die for a lost cause, a forsaken cause, is another thing entirely. It is a death stripped of honor, of purpose, of everything but the pain. The oaths we swore to God now feel like a one-sided contract. We have held up our end of the bargain. We have fought, we have bled, we have died, and God has failed to honor His. It is the ultimate breach of contract, the ultimate betrayal, and we are the victims. The city is becoming a monument to a failed covenant. Every burning building, every dead soldier, every unanswered prayer is a testament to our abandonment. We are a living parable, a cautionary tale for those who would place their faith in a silent God. We're left with only two possibilities, neither of them comforting. Either our sins are so great that we are beyond redemption, or God simply does not care. I do not know which is worse. A wrathful God can at least be understood. An indifferent God is a terror beyond comprehension. To port our crisis of faith, if you find a certain grim satisfaction in watching an entire theological worldview crumble into dust, then this is the channel for you. We are broadcasting live from the heart of a spiritual apocalypse. Subscribe now and bear witness to the death of an idea. Don't let this signal fade into the static of a godless universe. Your subscription is a defiant act, a refusal to let this story be silenced. It is a way of saying that even in the absence of divine intervention, the human voice can still be heard. Join us in this final, desperate prayer. Subscribe before the only thing left is the echoing silence of a forsaken city. In the vacuum of leadership left by our captured king and dead nobles, a man has stepped forward. Not a king, not a grand master, but a baron who wasn't even supposed to be here. Bastion of Ibelin. He came to Jerusalem merely to escort his wife and children to the coast, having sworn an oath to Saladin that he would not take up arms against him. A promise that lasted about as long as a snowball in this damnable heat. The city, it seems, had other plans for him. Bastion, our valiant leader, is running ragged trying to make miracles happen with stale bread and broken spears. He is the de facto commander of this doomed enterprise, a man handed a sinking ship and told to sail it to paradise. He didn't ask for this command, but he has accepted it with a grim determination that is both inspiring and profoundly depressing. Good man, terrible situation. His first act upon taking command was to knight every boy of noble birth over the age of 16. Some say it was a desperate move to bolster our numbers. I say it was an act of profound pessimism. He created 60 new knights in a single day, not to win a battle, but to ensure that the sons of our nobility could at least die with a title. A fine, if somewhat grim, coming-of-age ceremony. He is a man of pragmatism, a virtue as rare in this kingdom as a summer frost. While the priests are leading processions and the zealots are screaming for a glorious death, Bastion is counting spears, rationing grain, and trying to patch the holes in our crumbling walls. He is a man who understands the brutal arithmetic of a siege, and he knows that our numbers do not add up. His desperate pleas for reinforcements have gone, of course, unanswered. Who would he plead to? The ghosts of our army at Hattin? The kings of Europe, who are a year's voyage and 1,000 political squabbles away? He sends out riders, knowing they will be captured, sends out prayers, knowing they will be unanswered. It is a performance of hope for the benefit of a city that has none. The man is a whirlwind of activity. One moment he is on the walls, directing the defense, his voice a hoarse bark over the din of battle. The next he is in the city, settling disputes over water, organizing the fire brigades, comforting the terrified refugees. He is trying to be the father, the general, and the confessor to a city of 60,000 souls, and the strain is beginning to carve new lines on his face. His personal struggle is a palpable thing. You can see it in his eyes, the conflict between his duty as a knight and his responsibility as a man. The knight in him is sworn to fight to the last, to die for the holy city. But the man in him sees the faces of the women and children and knows that a glorious death for the few means a horrific slaughter for the many. It is an impossible choice, a cross of his own to bear. The attempts to negotiate are a masterclass in futility. Bastion has met with Saladin under a flag of truce, a lonely figure of defiance against a backdrop of overwhelming power. He has pleaded, he has argued, he has tried to reason with a man who holds all the cards. Saladin, to his credit, is a courteous opponent. He listens patiently, he offers his condolences, and then he politely refuses to lift the siege. The impossible choices he faces are enough to break a lesser man. The zealots in the city, led by the patriarch Heraclius, a man whose piety is matched only by his complete detachment from reality, demand that we fight to the death. They speak of the sin of surrender, of the eternal shame of handing the holy city over to the infidel. They are long on rhetoric and short on practical solution. Then there are the people, the ordinary terrified citizens who have no desire to become martyrs for a cause that is already lost. They see the fires, they hear the screams, they feel the hunger, and they beg Balian to save them. They do not care for the niceties of chivalric honor. They just want to live. And their pleas are a constant, heartbreaking counterpoint to the bombast of the zealots. Balian is caught in the middle, a man trying to navigate a path between two non-negotiable positions: fight to the death and condemn 60,000 people to slaughter, or surrender and face the eternal damnation of the zealots and the history books. It is a choice between two kinds of hell, and he is the one who must decide which one we will inhabit. His pragmatism is his greatest strength and his greatest burden. He sees the situation for what it is, a hopeless, unwinnable fight. He knows that every day we continue to resist, the price of our eventual surrender goes up. More lives will be lost, more of the city will be destroyed, and Saladin's terms will become harsher. But to voice this truth is to be branded a coward and a traitor. So he fights. He leads the defense with a skill and a courage that silences his critics. He is always at the point of greatest danger, his sword and his presence a source of inspiration to the weary defenders. He is playing the part of the valiant commander, even as he knows the play can only end in tragedy. It is a magnificent, heartbreaking performance. The personal toll on him is immense. He barely sleeps, he barely eats. He is a man running on fumes, sustained only by a sense of duty that is both admirable and insane. I see him sometimes, late at night, standing on the Tower of David, looking out at the endless sea of Saracen campfires, and in those quiet moments you can almost feel the weight of the world on his shoulders. His relationship with the patriarch is a study in contrasts. Balion, the practical soldier, and Heraclius, the theatrical priest. They are two poles of a dying world, the man of action and the man of faith, and their constant, low-level conflict is a perfect microcosm of the larger struggle that is tearing this city apart. The moment he truly understood the futility of it all was during a particularly brutal assault on the northern wall. Our men were breaking, the line was about to collapse. Balian himself had to rally a group of his personal knights to plug the breach. They held, but at a terrible cost, and in the aftermath, as he looked upon the dead and the wounded, I saw a look in his eyes that I had never seen before, the cold, hard certainty of defeat. He has tried to use the city's holy sites as a bargaining chip, a desperate, last-ditch effort to find some leverage. He has threatened to destroy the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque if Saladin does not offer better terms. It is a bluff, of course, a sacrilegious, unthinkable bluff, but it is a measure of his desperation, the act of a man who is willing to risk eternal damnation to save his people. The negotiations have become his personal crusade. He fights for lives, not for land. He is no longer trying to save the kingdom of Jerusalem, he is trying to save the people of Jerusalem. It is a subtle but profound shift, a quiet abandonment of the grand Crusader project in favor of a more basic, more human goal: survival. He is a man at war with his own legend. The code of chivalry demands a glorious death. His conscience demands a compassionate surrender. He is a knight and he is a man, and the two are locked in a mortal struggle for his soul, and the fate of 60,000 people hangs in the balance. The agony of his command is that he knows the truth, but he cannot speak it. He knows that resistance is futile, but he must continue to resist. He knows that surrender is inevitable, but he must pretend that victory is still possible. He is a liar and a hypocrite in the service of a greater good. It is a moral tightrope walk over a pit of fire. If you're enjoying this commander's agony, if the sight of a good man grappling with impossible choices is your particular brand of entertainment, then please subscribe. We offer a front-row seat to the most excruciating decisions in history. Don't miss a single moment of the torment. Don't let Balian's struggle be for naught. Your subscription ensures that this story of pragmatic heroism, of a man who chose people over principles, is heard. Support this broadcast and honor the man who is trying to find a humane end to an inhumane war. Subscribe now, before the final terrible choice is made. It's over. The fighting has stopped. The final desperate charge did not come. There was no glorious last stand. no martyrdom on the walls of the holy city. There was only the quiet, undignified shuffle of a man walking out under a flag of truce. Balian of Ibelin, our reluctant leader, has made his choice. We surrendered. To the infidel. The words taste like ash in my mouth. The decision was made after the northern wall was finally breached. The sappers had done their work and a section of the rampart came crashing down, opening a wound in our defenses that we could not possibly hope to close. The end was no longer a matter of if, but when, and how bloody. Balian, ever the pragmatist, chose the path of least blood. A sensible, if deeply unsatisfying, choice. He went to Saladin not as a conqueror, but as a petitioner. He laid our desperation bare. He told the Sultan that if terms were not offered, we would kill our own families, burn our own homes, and destroy the holy sites, including the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Then we would sally forth and fight to the last man, selling our lives so dearly that the Saracens would lose thousands. It was a bluff born of utter despair, and by some miracle it worked. Saladin, a man who appreciates a certain grim flair for the dramatic, was apparently moved. Or perhaps he simply did not want to rule over a city of ash and corpses. He agreed to terms. Not the unconditional surrender he could have easily demanded, but a negotiated, almost civilized end to the barbarity. A bitter pill to swallow, but one that would not choke us all to death. The terms were simple and brutal in their simplicity. Ransom, a price on every head, 10 dinars for every man, 5 for every woman, and 1 for every child. Pay the price, and you could walk out of the city with what you could carry. Fail to pay, and you would be taken as a slave. The city was no longer a holy cause, it was a marketplace, and we were the merchandise. A wave of frantic activity swept the city, a desperate scramble to raise the required funds. The wealthy opened their coffers, the churches melted down their silver chalices, the poor sold their last meager possessions. It was a frantic, undignified fire sale of a kingdom, every man for himself in a desperate bid to buy his own freedom. The bonds of community, already frayed, snapped completely. The incredible act of mercy, however, came from a source we did not expect. Saladin, the great enemy, the infidel conqueror, showed a clemency that shamed us all. He saw the desperation, the poverty, the thousands who could not possibly hope to meet his price, and he relented. His brother Al-Adil asked for 1,000 slaves as his reward, and then promptly set them all free. The patriarch, Heraclius, paid his own ransom and then trundled out of the city with wagons laden with church treasure, leaving thousands of his own flock to their fate. A true shepherd of the people. And Saladin himself, in a gesture that will forever be a thorn in the side of our own chroniclers, paid the ransom for thousands of the elderly and the poor out of his own treasury. He allowed the women whose husbands had died or been captured to leave without payment. He established guards to protect the Christian pilgrims on their sad journey to the coast, ensuring they were not molested or robbed. It was a display of chivalry that we, the supposed exemplars of that code, could only watch with a stunned, humiliated silence. We surrendered to the infidel. I know, shocking. But Saladin, surprisingly, was quite merciful. Unlike us when we first took this city. A bit embarrassing, really. The stories of our own conquest in the year 1099 are not so pleasant. Our forefathers waded through streets that ran ankle-deep in blood. They slaughtered men, women, and children, without distinction, in the mosques, in the synagogues, in their own homes. They killed until the stench of the dead was so great they could barely stand it. Our victory was a bloodbath, a frenzied, savage orgy of violence that we celebrated as a righteous act of God. We, the soldiers of Christ, came to the holy city and turned it into a charnel house. And now, almost a century later, the roles are reversed, and the man we call a barbarian has shown us the meaning of the word mercy. The irony is so thick it could be cut with a sword. The contrast between our actions and his is a stark, uncomfortable mirror. It forces us to look at ourselves, at our own history, at the foundations of our own kingdom, and to see the ugliness that lies beneath the veneer of our piety. We claim to be fighting for God, but our actions were those of devils. Saladin claimed to be fighting for his faith, and his actions were, well, they were more Christian than our own. The evacuation of the city is a pitiful sight. A long, slow procession of the defeated, trudging out of the gates they once swore to defend. They carry their children, their bundles of possessions, their shame. They look back at the city, at their homes, at the life they are leaving behind, and their faces are a mask of grief. This is not a glorious crusade, it is a death march of a kingdom. The Saracen soldiers watch us go, their faces a mixture of triumph and, dare I say it, a kind of pity. There is no gloating, no jeering, only a quiet, disciplined observance of their sultan's orders. They are the victors, but they are gracious in their victory. A courtesy we did not extend to them. The holy sites, the places we were so certain God would protect, are being treated with a respect that is baffling. Saladin has placed guards on the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, forbidding any looting or vandalism. He has allowed the Eastern Christians to remain, to continue their worship. He is a better guardian of our own holy places than we were of his. The world has turned upside down. As for us knights, the survivors, we are a broken, leaderless bunch. Some of us paid our own ransom, others were ransomed by the generosity of our conqueror. We are now scattered, drifting towards the few coastal cities that remain in our hands. We are an army without a kingdom, a brotherhood of the defeated. Our oaths are broken, our purpose is lost. We are ghosts, haunting the ruins of our own ambition. The fall of Jerusalem is not just a military defeat, it is a moral one. We were weighed in the balance, and we were found wanting. Not by God, perhaps, but by the standards of our own supposed chivalry. We were outthought, outfought, and, in the end, outclassed. A bitter but undeniable truth. And so, this broadcast is coming to an end. I am no longer a defender of Jerusalem, just another refugee on a dusty road to nowhere. The story is over. The great and glorious kingdom of Jerusalem, built on blood and faith, has fallen. And its end was not a bang, but a whimper. The whimper of a merchant haggling over the price of his own life. We are a people in exile, cast out from our own holy land. The great crusade has failed. The dream of Outremer is dead. All that is left is the long, slow journey home, and the even longer, slower process of trying to understand how we failed so completely. The blame will be cast, of course. The chroniclers will write their histories, the priests will preach their sermons, the kings will make their speeches. They will blame the leaders, they will blame the soldiers, they will blame the sins of the people. But they will miss the point. We did not lose because we were sinful, we lost because we were arrogant, we lost because we were divided, we lost because our enemy was better. And in the end, in the quiet moments of reflection that will surely haunt us for the rest of our days, we will have to confront the most inconvenient truth of all, that the infidel we came to conquer was in many ways a better man than we were. And that is a truth that will burn more than any fire and cut deeper than any sword. Keep the inconvenient truths coming. The story doesn't end here. The repercussions of this day will echo for centuries. If you want to understand the fallout, the blame, the next crusade that will inevitably be launched to avenge this humiliation, then like and subscribe. The fall is just the beginning. Don't let this be the final word. Our kingdom is gone, but our story remains. It is a cautionary tale, a lesson in humility written in blood and shame. Subscribe now and ensure that the lessons of this defeat are not forgotten. Join us and follow the long, winding road of the vanquished. The broadcast from Jerusalem is over. The broadcast from exile is about to begin. The static is thinner now, the broadcast clearer, but the knight's voice is weary, heavy with the dust of the road. The background is filled with the faint, shuffling sound of thousands of feet and the occasional cry of a child. The gates of Jerusalem are now behind us. The great exodus has begun. This is not the triumphant march of a victorious army, but the slow, shuffling procession of the dispossessed. We are a river of sorrow flowing out of the city that was once the center of our world. Each footstep is a final, painful farewell. We are a kingdom in exile, a people without a home, and the road ahead is long and uncertain. We marched out, heads down, clutching what little we had managed to salvage from the wreck of our lives, a bundle of clothes, a cooking pot, a weeping child. These are the last remnants of our grand and glorious kingdom, our holy city, gone. It feels rather less holy when you're walking away from it, defeated, with the dust of its streets on your worn-out sandals. The sadness is a physical weight, a shroud that covers us all. It is in the stooped shoulders of the old men, the vacant eyes of the women, the silent tears that trace paths through the grime on the children's faces. We have lost everything, not just our homes and our fortunes, but our purpose, our certainty, our very reason for being here. We are a hollow people, emptied of everything but grief. The exhaustion is bone deep, not just the exhaustion of the siege, of the fighting and the fear, but the exhaustion of a dream that has died. We are tired in our souls, a weariness that no amount of sleep can cure. We move like sleepwalkers, propelled forward by a momentum we do not understand, towards a future we cannot imagine. The contrast between us and our conquerors is a study in quiet humiliation. As we shuffle out a column of broken, defeated refugees, Saladin's soldiers march in. They are not a riotous, looting mob, as our own men were when we first took this city. They are disciplined, silent, their faces a mask of solemn piety. They move with a purpose and a reverence that is deeply, profoundly unsettling. They enter the city not as conquerors, but as liberators. They treat it not as a prize of war, but as a sacred trust. They wash the walls of the Al-Aqsa Mosque with rosewater. They replace the great golden cross on the dome of the rock with the crescent of Islam. They are erasing us, not with violence, but with a quiet, efficient piety that is more devastating than any sword. The image of the patriarch Heraclius will be forever burned into my memory, as thousands of his flock were being led into slavery, unable to pay their ransom. He trundled out of the city with wagons groaning under the weight of church gold and treasures, a true shepherd protecting his most valuable assets. His concern for his fellow Christians was, shall we say, selective. But then there is the image of Saladin, who, upon seeing the wealth that Heraclius was carrying, simply waved him on. He did not confiscate it, he did not demand that it be used to ransom the poor. He let him go, a gesture of either supreme confidence or supreme contempt. I am not sure which is more insulting. We are a sorry sight, a testament to the vanity of our ambitions. The knights, stripped of their armor and their pride, walk alongside the peasants they once ruled. The noble ladies, their fine silks caked with dust, comfort their crying children. The priests, their voices hoarse from unanswered prayers, stare blankly at the road ahead. We are all equal now, united in our shared and utter defeat. The road to the coast is a pilgrimage of sorrow. We are a slow-moving target for bandits and raiders, but Saladin's guards, true to their master's word, keep them at bay. We are being protected by our enemies from our own people. The world has been turned inside out, and the moral compass we once steered by is spinning wildly, its needle broken. The loss of Jerusalem is a wound that will never heal. It is a constant, dull ache in the heart of Christendom. For nearly a century it was the symbol of our triumph, the proof of our divine favor. Now it is the symbol of our failure, the proof of our abandonment. How do we explain this to our children, to ourselves? The contrasting images will haunt our chroniclers, the victorious Saladin showing mercy and respect, the defeated Christians squabbling over their possessions and abandoning their poor. It is not a flattering portrait. It is a story of a great and noble cause that rotted from the inside out, corrupted by greed, by pride, by our own spectacular incompetence. As we walk, I look back at the city, a silhouette against the setting sun. The golden cross on the dome of the rock is gone, replaced by the crescent. The bells of the churches are silent, replaced by the call of the muezzin. It is no longer our city. It is a foreign land once more, a place where we are no longer welcome. The exhaustion is not just physical, it is spiritual. We have been drained of our faith, our certainty, our very sense of self. We are a people adrift, cut loose from the anchor of our most sacred beliefs. Who are we without Jerusalem? What is the purpose of a crusader without a crusade? These are the questions that we whisper to each other in the cold desert nights. The Saracens watch us go with a quiet dignity. There is no celebration, no gloating, just a solemn sense of purpose, a feeling that they have righted a great historical wrong. And in the face of their quiet conviction, our own loud, bombastic faith seems hollow and insincere. The children suffer the most. They do not understand the politics, the theology, the grand sweep of history. They only understand the hunger in their bellies, the weariness in their limbs, the fear in their parents' eyes. They are the innocent victims of our failed ambitions, and their silent suffering is the most eloquent condemnation of our folly. We are a procession of ghosts haunting the landscape of our own defeat. We are the living embodiment of a broken oath, a failed promise. The dream of Outrema, the kingdom beyond the sea, has dissolved into a nightmare of dust and disillusionment. The kindness of our enemy is the cruelest cut of all. It denies us the comfort of our own self-righteous hatred. We want to see them as monsters, as inhuman barbarians, but they refuse to play the part. They treat us with a humanity that we, in our moment of triumph, denied them. And, in doing so, they have won a moral victory that is far more complete than their military one. The road ahead is uncertain. We will make our way to Tyre, to Tripoli, to the last remaining slivers of our kingdom. We will regroup, we will rebuild, we will plan our revenge. The cycle of violence will continue, but something has been broken, something has been lost that can never be recovered. The age of our innocent certainty is over. If you're still processing this bittersweet departure, if the sight of a defeated army being treated with more civility by its conqueror than it ever showed in victory is a concept you find compelling, be sure to subscribe. The ironies of history are our specialty. Don't let this sad procession march into the dust of forgotten history. Your subscription is an act of remembrance, a way of ensuring that the full, complicated, and deeply uncomfortable story of our downfall is told. Join us for the next chapter, the exile, the recriminations, and the inevitable bloody sequel. Subscribe now. The road is long, and the story is far from over. Sound of static intensifying, the distant, mournful wail of a shofar or bagpipes fading. Sir Galliard's voice, tired, but with a lingering defiance. The dust of the road is my new home, the sky my only roof. We are the last remnants of a broken kingdom, a scattered flock with no shepherd, walking away from the city that was supposed to be the heart of our world. The great gates of Jerusalem have closed behind us, not with a bang, but with a quiet, final groan, a sound that will echo in my memory far longer than the clash of any sword. The dream of Outremere is over, and the taste of the bitter morning after is on all our tongues. We have seen the great tapestry of our holy cause unravel thread by bloody thread. We saw the steel, the bright, righteous steel of our swords, and the dark, patient steel of the Saracen scimitar. We saw it clash on the walls, in the desert, and in the hearts of men. In the end, there was simply more of theirs than ours. We have felt the fire, not the holy fire of faith we were promised, but the literal, choking, indiscriminate fire of burning homes and scorched earth. It consumed our defenses, it consumed our hope, and it has left us with nothing but the black ash of our own arrogance. We came to this land with fire in our souls, and have left it with nothing but the smell of smoke in our clothes. A perfectly symmetrical, if deeply unpleasant conclusion. And the oaths. Gods above, the oaths we broke. We broke them with each other, bickering over scraps of land while a storm gathered on the horizon. We broke them with our enemies, our truces as fragile as a spider's web. And in the end, in the deafening silence from the heavens, it felt as though the greatest oath of all, the divine promise of our victory, was broken with us. A kingdom built on promises is a house built on sand, and the tide has finally come in. And so, as the gates of Jerusalem close behind us, and the banner of the Saracen flies over the Holy Sepulchre, this has been Sir Galliard, your humble and currently unemployed knight of the hospital, broadcasting from the wreckage of a dream. We saw the steel clash, the fires rage, and the oaths, both human and divine, shatter into dust. We were the sword of God, and we have been sheathed, perhaps for good. If this desperate, darkly humorous transmission from the very heart of Crusader failure has given you a moment of grim amusement or a profound appreciation for your own era's relative lack of overwhelming siege warfare, then my purpose is served. We have offered you a glimpse into the abyss, a front-row seat to the spectacular implosion of a holy enterprise. If you have learned anything, let it be this: piety is no substitute for a good supply line. Keep listening, keep questioning. Question the certainty of your leaders, the righteousness of your cause, the silence of your gods. For we were the most certain of men, and our certainty has led us to this dusty, ignominious road. The world is not as simple as the preachers would have you believe, a lesson we have learned in the most painful way imaginable. For the sake of the Holy Land, wherever it may next be found, keep that subscribe button pressed. Do not let this signal die in the desert. An idea is only truly lost when its story is no longer told. By subscribing, you become a chronicler of our folly, a keeper of the inconvenient truths we have broadcast, because even when the cause is lost, the lessons remain. Until the next broadcast, from Acre perhaps, Eos Vult, God wills it, or so they say. Static overtakes the voice entirely, fading into a vast, empty silence.